EMEA event. In this session, we'll be discussing compliance and AML for money transfers. I'm Oussama Kseibati, Head of Business Solutions at RemitONE, and will be hosting today's event. We'll have an hour and 15 minutes for today's webinar. For the first 15 minutes, I'll be moderating a discussion with our expert panelists. Then there'll be 20 minutes at the end of the session for questions from the audience. Please submit your questions via the Q&A button on the right-hand side of your screen at any point during the webinar, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. We'd also like to send a special thanks to our event sponsors, Vine, Nairagram, Trust Payments, Azure Finance, WorldPay, GBG, and Currency Cloud. Please make sure that you visit their virtual booths between the panel sessions, which you can navigate to via the menu at the top of your screen. They'd love to hear from you, speak to you about your business, and see how they can support you. Before we dive into the discussion, just a few words about RemitONE, the organizers behind today's event. As a company, our mission at RemitONE is to empower the global money transfer industry with technology and business solutions to provide secure and fair transfers for those who need it most. That's why, in 2018, RemitONE launched Innovation in Payment and Remittances, otherwise known as IPR, to bring together various industry supply chain members to help drive positive change. We are grateful that so many of you have joined the session today to continue this mission with us. To start today's session, I'm very pleased to introduce our expert panelists. Firstly, joining us, we have Richard Spink, Sales Director at GBG. Richard is part of GBG Business Development Team and looks after channel partnerships. He's worked for the last 10 years in ID with GBG and Experian. Prior to delivering global ID verification partnerships, he worked at American Express. Next up, we have Gabrielle O'Michaels, Senior Compliance Officer at Nairagram. Gabrielle is an MSc graduate from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, and a certified member of Global CAMS community, with about 5 years in the international money transfer fintech space. Also joining us is Ibrahim Mohammed, independent payment consultant at FinXplor. Ibrahim has over 20 years experience consulting on money transfer, prepaid card covering, various areas relating to operations, technology, compliance, products, and business development. Ibrahim currently works as an independent payments consultant, providing specialized consultancy to startups and incumbents. Last but not least, we have Imad Chishti, Director of Payments and Compliance at Evantagesoft. Imad serves as a subject matter expert on digital finance and mobile finance services. He has an experienced digital finance professor with over 23 years of senior management and consulting experience during his career. Imad has worked on several local and international organizations as a part of some reputable consultancy firms. So for those of you who are not familiar with the format, we're now going to the questions. We have 8 or 9 questions to ask the panelists. So what we tend to do is we tend to direct the question at one of our panelists to begin with. But again, to the rest of our panelists, if you have any input on that particular subject matter, please feel free to also jump in and share your views. We can get a good discourse going. So my first question is going to be to Gabrielle. Hi, Gabrielle. What are the main challenges? What are the main challenges facing MTOs regarding compliance and regulation?
The main challenges affecting MTOs, well, it has to be with the adaptability in different jurisdictions. So we all understand different countries have whatever guides them. Let's say in the UK, you have the FCA, in the US, you have the BSA and all of that, FinXplor and all, that really regulates things over there. So sometimes when you get to have certain partnerships with of MTOs in these jurisdictions. There's been kind of hiccups here and there because there's a kind of difference, or would I say there's some similarities, but there's still a little bit of some difference between how things are done in this corridor or in this jurisdiction and in the US, for example. So sometimes this can be a bit of a kind of a setback on how things are done between both partners. Also, for the risk, though, when it comes to our kind of business, it's about knowing what you really want to do. We have different kind of fintech companies, and everyone now, in our field doing money transmission, we know the core basics, the core risks that we face. It's always about, how can we create a very effective anti-money laundering program? How can we implement these programs in such a way as to protect ourselves and also enable us to service our customers or even our clients who rely on our services. So what I always would put in first is, why do you want to have, a risk assessment on your operations, really? You need to know the first thing of what you want to achieve, and that is to detect and also to prevent, your system or your company as a money transfer company being used by money launderers in any way, because they always find ways of looking out for vulnerabilities and then using that to aid their own needs. So you have to know first is you need to detect, create a system, an anti-money laundering system that program rather, that helps you to detect and to prevent, your system or your company being used in such a way. Also, you also need to be very conversant with your environment or with your kind of business, the clients you have on board. You need to know the jurisdictions you're working from and also let them understand the regulatory policies that you have to abide by in your own jurisdictions. We do a lot of cross-border payments, right? So you always need to factor in all these regulatory policies and make sure that you are really capturing the basics that is necessary for your own growth as a company. So what I always put in first for any money transfer company is have a very effective, anti-money laundering program, which entails having a good KYC, customer due diligence process. You have a compliance officer who really, understands the business, well-trained, or department that is well-trained. Company staff members are also trained to understand what their daily, job expectations are, what they are meant to do. Especially key staffs, what they're meant to do and what they're not. It also helps to make it easy for everyone in the company to understand the regulatory expectations, because we have this coming out every day, new rules, or not every day though, but quite frequently we have new regulatory obligations being set out there, and that's the function of the compliance, in a company to help disseminate that information in a way that everyone can understand, and know what they need to do and put in place properly for the organizations to follow the regulatory expectations. Also, it's very important while you have all your anti-money laundering programs being set, you also have to incorporate an independent testing for your AML programs in case of loopholes or just some kind of weaknesses that you may have. And this is actually structured on a very yearly basis, mostly annual. So these are kind of key factors, that should be incorporated in your program to create a risk-based, kind of compliance program for your company in order to know who am I going to be onboarding into my company, or the kind of customers you're going to be servicing, to help you be more proactive than reactive. We are not just about trying to resolve a problem, it's preventing the problem from happening. This is the best of our capabilities. And these are very interesting key risk issues that I think we money transfer companies face and that we really need to really focus on. And it's always evolving. And this is not just a one-time, event. Ongoing, we'll find ourselves now integrating a lot with so many anti-money laundering software companies, who have a robust system for your PEP screening, for sanction screening, and all of that. You just have to really be in front in terms of innovations and in the tech department, just to make sure you're really going in trend and to make things less manual and a bit more automated for your services. That will really help you to approach things more proactively in creating a risk-based system for your company. That's really the key for me when it comes to money transmission for our kind of business.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. That is really informative. And Gabrielle, just to recap, so you're saying that, again, it is important for a range of staff in the business, not only the compliance officer, but even the cashiers and everyone to have at least some level of understanding of the compliance. And once you have that understanding of the compliance, really having the tools in place, so having the right technology, that's going to help you do the job and up to the correct level and standard that the governing body requires. And also you touched upon, because you operate over several jurisdictions, understanding the different rules and regulations. Again, compliance can be a minefield. Now, when we're especially looking at different jurisdictions, you have to abide by each one of those as well at the same time, so it can become quite complicated. And again, technology, rules-based technology can always assist with that and make it much smoother, and make hopefully the journey for your client smoother as well.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for that input. I'll move on to my next question. Let me reset that. My next question actually is going to be for Richard. So Richard, what is digital ID? Why is digital ID necessary? How does it impact KYC and AML?
Okay, thanks, Oussama. Hello, everyone. Digital identity is a big subject, I guess. And what is digital ID? Well, it's different now to what it will be. I think it's important to understand the context of what digital ID eventually is trying to deliver. But in practical terms, digital identity at the moment is an idea, and it's being delivered in a few countries, but it's not global. And we're certainly not at that point where it's making any difference whatsoever to AML KYC processes. In terms of, if you look at Wikipedia and you look at the definition of digital identity, it will tell you about it's about access to computer systems, and actually that's a good place to start. If you think about how you log into something, into your work, if you turn on your laptop in the morning, how do you log in? There are certain credentials that you provide that enable you to get through that process. When you go through that process, you don't typically share a passport. You don't tell someone how old you are, but your business knows that it is you logging in to your laptop, or at least assumes it's you logging into your laptop. So if you then translate that into an MTO business, how do you make sure that your customers are who you say you are? So at the moment, there's a process of checking proof of ID and proof of address. That process is typically will change based on the regulation, but also on where your business is as well. So I'm talking to you from the UK. Here in the UK, the process is defined by the local regulator, the FCA, that you need to use more than one source of data to confirm identity. But there's no definition of what identity is. It just means you want two sources of data, one to confirm that someone lives at their address, another one to confirm that that is their name and that is their date of birth. It is clear, but it's not clear what the best way to deliver that information is. And in terms of the landscape for this, well, at the moment, as I say, that process is delivered in slightly different ways in different countries. So it's not digital ID as digital ID will be in 10 years' time. It's digital ID as we are now, essentially means confirming proof of ID, proof of address. And at GBG, we ran a survey on this a year ago. And for most people, that means something like presenting a driving license, sharing information to confirm their date of birth, or presenting a passport. But our expectation is that in 10 years' time, that will be running that same process, but using a mobile phone number, an email address, and a biometric. And the biometric that's typically used in that process at the moment is a face. So where technology is at the moment is there is a GBG of 1, but there are many providers out there where you can run a check to confirm that you are who you say you are, in the sense that your face looks the same as the photo of you on your passport, and you appear to be live. You appear to be behind the device that you're running that process on. The digital identity in that process at the moment is anchored in information that comes from a government or comes from a credit reference agency or a source of data that is approved by the regulator in your market to confirm that you are who you say you are. So in this process, the information is being taken on trust from an approved source of data. As Oussama said, I've been in this world probably for, well, I've not been in this world probably, I have been in the ID world for 10 years now. So 10 years ago, data was where it was at. That's changed now. Documents and biometrics are where it's at. The facial biometric is most commonly used, but in countries across the EU, local regulators are looking at video interaction as well. And in Germany and in Italy, it's the video interaction is probably the most common way of capturing proof of identity. But in other countries across the EU, it's not. Those countries are happy to do what we do here in the UK, which is proof of ID and proof of address. So the landscape in terms of digital identities it's coming. What is it at the moment? It's an idea. It's not taken off because ultimately it requires governments to make digital identity become a reality. There are digital identity schemes that are running that are effectively used in across Scandinavia, in the Netherlands, and then obviously in the Middle East. Obviously, there are versions of that where for example, in Dubai, there is an ID. The evidence of that ID and proof that it is you and that it is your number, again, is available, but again, it's not available globally. It's available to businesses who are operating in that country. So the landscape is mixed here, and I'm sure we will get there at some point, but it's all about which organisation, and I don't mean providers like us, but which organisation do you as an individual want to trust your information with in order to ultimately go through a process of creating a digital identity that you're then happy to share attributes of, notably name or mobile or email, when you're asked for that information by a business. We'll probably talk about this in a bit more detail, but I think that's probably enough for now. Oussama.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, Rich, I was just going to pry a little bit there, just a little bit more, and ask you, GBG yourselves mentioning ID, photo ID verification. Because you guys in the UK, it doesn't mean that you don't check or have access to databases and check IDs of nationals from other countries. Can you just dive into that a little bit, please, for those who don't know GBG?
The landscape is that there are lots of databases around the world, but there aren't as many as you think. So every government will have its own version of what we refer to in the UK as the electoral roll. And some are more advanced than others. You know, Estonia delivers digital ID. In Belgium, they have a product called It's Me. In the Netherlands, they talk about IDIN. These are government schemes. The UK isn't particularly advanced in that process, although it talks a lot about it. We actually haven't got something that's usable for the vast bulk of the population here. Data, broadly speaking, comes from two sources, or three sources, I suppose, but two sources where it's commonly used. That will be government data or credit reference agency data. And it's available around the world, but nothing like where it's strong are predominantly UK, US, Australia, and Germany as well. But that isn't the case, for example, in Italy or in Spain, because or France, for example, where they do not have the same culture as arguably we do in the UK or in the US for lending money and sharing information about who's borrowed what from whom.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
Richard, I'm going to move on to our next question. And our next question is going to be aimed at Ibrahim. Hi, Ibrahim. My question to you is, what are the key factors to consider when developing an effective MSB programs for MSBs? Sorry, I think that means AML programs for MSB, sorry. I think that's supposed to say. Yeah, what are the key factors when considering developing an effective AML program for MSBs? Are you with us, Ibrahim? I think he's having some. We can't hear you, Ibrahim. Ibrahim, can you try to switch your microphone, Ibrahim? I think we're having some difficulties hearing you.
He looks very happy, Oussama.
Yeah, we've lost him. Okay, let's just give it a moment. See if when he logs back in, if that makes a difference. If not, we'll probably move on. Okay. Okay. Well, what we'll do is this: if we move on to the next one, and then hopefully once Ibrahim joins us, we'll go back to him. So my next one's for Imad. What are you seeing in Pakistan and the Middle East? What challenges are you facing in that region? So particularly looking around AML, compliance, fraud, laundering, funding, things like that. What are we seeing in the Pakistan and Middle East region?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so interesting times. There are a lot of things happening and a lot of changes that we are seeing happening in countries like Pakistan and Middle East. So we are seeing two major aspects that are really creating an impact. One is that ever since this pandemic started, there is a drastic change in customer behavior. If you see that, countries like South Asia, mostly these are remittance receiving countries, and Middle East is predominantly ascending corridor. From Pakistan's perspective, for example, the regulator estimates that the formal remittances through formal channels are somewhere in the range of $20 billion US, and that is like what has been shown, seeing the data that we have been seeing in past few years. But what's regulator estimates that the informal channels and informal remittances are somewhere between 40 to 60 billion US dollar. So there is a huge gap in the formal and informal remittance channel, and MTOs have been, and regulator and banks have been trying desperately for past many years to somehow move those informal remittances towards formal channels by offering incentives and many different things. There are some very lucrative incentives being offered to the customers just to motivate them to do it. But fortunately, unfortunately, with the pandemic, a lot of things have changed. With the travel getting curbed, restriction getting limited, we are seeing a rapid rise in remittances coming through formal channels, because people don't have means to use those informal channels anymore. So they have to move towards formal channels to continue to provide money to their families back home. Now, the challenge that we have on hand right now with respect to this customer behavior change is to make sure that these customers should not go back to their old habits and to those old channels. We understand, we have done a lot of research with our partners, with our clients, and in general, we understand that there are certain specific traits that or aspects or elements that customers see as useful when they are using these informal channels. And some of those can be easily addressed. The only thing was that customers were lacking motivation to use formal channels. So that's the biggest challenge right now, is to keep these customers continue to use these formal channels, which means that that banks, MTOs, and money transfer organizations have to make sure that they address those customer needs, just to make sure that they don't go back to their old habits. The second thing that we are seeing happening is that with the rise of fintechs, banks are being challenged significantly. Same goes for MTOs. But in our understanding, MTO's ability to improvise and innovate is much faster than any conventional traditional bank. It's because of the kind of environment that banks are. As like we use this very famous phrase in many of our client presentation, is that there is a huge difference in the mindsets. And the key difference is basically that banks are basically compliance and risk driven. So they will not do and act upon anything unless they have a full assurance from their compliance and risk that everything is by book. As opposed to like lean organizations like MTOs and fintechs, they are very customer driven. So they will do everything and anything that makes customer happy. So basically, they are not trying to overdo compliance and risk. So they are trying to balance carefully between what they have to assure in terms of compliance and in terms of regulatory and legal requirements and associated risks. But they are also making sure that they deliver a superior and wow customer experience to the customer. So with that, we feel that this goes hand in hand with the digitalization efforts. Organizations, especially financial services sector, have came through a long journey of understanding the market, understanding the customer needs, transformation towards digitalization, and we think that digitalization goes hand in hand with in terms of addressing these two critical issues. And that is what we have been trying to do, and that is what we have been working with our clients and partners with, in terms of like enabling digitalization, helping them transform their processes, helping them automate, helping them improve customer experience overall, just to make sure that this trend continues, and this shift in customer behavior, it is capitalized to its maximum potential.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Imad, just to go a little bit deeper, what in specific is being done to help the client space literacy in terms of the tech? How can we make them more literate when it comes down to the tech? As you just mentioned, some of them use the less the traditional way or the less conventional way, whether it be hawala, whether it be cash. How can we keep them using the more tech ways? Because as we know that that's one way of keeping more compliant or having visibility. So what can we do in that area?
Yeah, there are different things that we have been doing. In my personal experience and in my previous associations, what we have been doing and what organizations are doing is that they are doing it on both sides, like sending and receiving side, because there is a strong family connections. Sometimes sender is the one dictating the terms in terms of what type of service they want to use. Sometimes it's the receiver who wants to dictate that term, because it all depends on the situation and the geography where they are in. So sometimes like sender may have a certain inclination towards a certain mode of transaction, but receiver don't have access to that service. So what we are doing basically is that we feel that changing a customer behavior, it goes hand in hand with the motivation. Why a customer would want to use something new or something different that they have been using in the past. So we have been using different incentives that we are offering. Some incentives are being offered in partnership with the government. So there are a lot of lucrative subsidies that government is providing, rebates that government is providing, not just to the MTOs, but also to the customer. And that is what is motivating customers to learn more about. Because see, just take an example of Facebook. Like Facebook is something that even someone who is not literate or who has not done any formal education, even he uses Facebook. It's all because of he's motivated to use it, and that motivation fast tracks their learning curve. So same goes for remittances. Like the way we are trying to package different incentives for customers, those packages are mostly directly proportional to their needs. So for example, we top up customers who are receiving continuously international remittances. We are providing them with airtime balance, with international airtime minutes as well, because we know that they have someone living abroad, and it will be good to have a connection established between the two. Obviously, the size of remittances, for example, in countries like Pakistan and South Asia in general, it's somewhere between like $100 to $250 mostly. So the size is not higher. So it's only meeting their immediate needs. So they don't have a lot of excess money in pocket.
And are wallets used in Pakistan and Asia? Are e-wallets something that are, again, to make them more tech literal or give them access to the actual banking? Because again, as you mentioned, one of the issues might be that they might not have access to receive a bank transfer, so that's why they might be demanding that they receive cash payments. Is e-wallets, because I know it's quite big in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. I know, Gabrielle, you guys use e-wallets quite big out there. Is that big in Asia? Is that something that's catching on, and can that help drive that?
It's phenomenal. I think if you see the global landscape, and you are spot on. Basically, the game changer in Pakistan. Two things have really revolutionized the financial industry. One is the e-wallet space, the rise of the e-wallets, and the second is the biometric verification that has been done. So now the whole population, adult population, is biometric verified, and there are roughly 45 million registered mobile accounts in Pakistan right now, from a population of 120 million with an adult population of 70 to 80 million. So you can see that that compared with 15 million, 16 million banked customers, mobile wallet density is much wider and much more than that. So these incentives that I was mentioning, we are offering these incentives through wallet. And customer using that wallet can make use of different use cases on daily basis, be it payments, be it like money transfers, if they want to have access to cash, and many different things. And last thing that I want to mention is that we are providing tax subsidy as well. Like, it's not us, but we are leveraging on the government's tax subsidies that international remittance do not attract any cash withholding tax withdrawal, which is a huge benefit for customers. So these are things we are packaging together to offer a full, complete value proposition to our customers.
Thank you so much, Imad, for that insightful input and answer there. Gabrielle, I'm going to swing back round to you now, and this is probably quite a tenuous question here. Do current regulations, and when I mean current regulations, we know they change minute for minute, so I might say current now, but we may wake up tomorrow morning and they've changed. And this is probably part of the questions as well. Do current regulations impede or enable innovations in the industry? How can regulators balance evoking trust for consumers whilst avoiding stiffening innovation in the industry?
Right. Well, it goes both ways. So I would say yes, regulations in a way can impede innovations in the industry, and also can improve it. We can see certain cases where a new regulation comes out, and then it gives new ideas, it gives birth to new technological innovation that comes forward, and then people are beginning to try different things. Like right now we see ourselves as money transmitters going into the use of AIs, machine learnings, and all of that, right? It's because of the pressure we've received over the years from regulators, and saying, oh, they want this done in a certain way, and they have very good reasons for it. So it gives birth to new opportunities, and sometimes could really halt certain processes. So if a new regulation comes out, let's say next week, and it's saying, hey, we want to scrap this particular thing off that we've been doing, and we found a better way to do this, right? If it comes to a point like that, it's going to hold some processes. Using Nigeria, for example, when the CBN policy came out for the dollar for dollar, where you cannot remit into the country with the Naira currency, it created a whole lot of halts on processes because customers, wherever they were sending money from, didn't know at that point in time that the regulatory authority had given a new mandate on how funds should be paid, right? And they are expecting this money to keep going the way it was, and then they could feel there was some kind of delay and a transition was taking place, and some customers also were not really okay with not getting their beneficiaries being paid in that currency. So it cost a whole lot of back and forth even with clients, but we had to do what we had to do. We had to make the necessary changes, and that's really another key factor. As a company, we need to be able to adapt quickly, even if not quickly, but at least be adaptable, to the new regulatory changes that come in. And then thanks to the tech part of our kind of business, technology evolves every day. So it may look like, okay, it's take a month, or it takes some weeks to get certain things done, but they actually still get done. So it's a both way, it affects things both ways rather. It depends on it depends on what situation comes up and what is being addressed. So the other way I could see that the regulatory system of, bringing up new, mandates for money transmitting companies to follow, sometimes they could be a bit very distant in terms of communicating with the innovators themselves. There's this disparity. They don't communicate as much. But I think over the years, they began to really build that culture in trying to really create forums where they can discuss, and say, okay, this is what we want to do. How can the tech or innovative people rather, how can they put certain things in place to aid the system? They need to be a bit more customer centric, in their applications. They also need to think about the right type of partnership, because you may bring out a new regulation and say, hey, I want to do this. And we, the money transmitter companies, we have the obligation to put our customers, in a certain way, how I put it, communicate with them in a way they could understand what we are trying to do, what the regulatory authorities' aim is at, what they want to achieve at the end of the day. And that's really where the compliance officer or the compliance department comes in every corporate organization, because they need to be able to disseminate that information. I think I said that before, to not just only staff, in every company, so that everyone can understand in detail why they're doing what they're doing, and then how to go about it. Also, talking about making your customers and your client base a bit comfortable, trusting of your process, it takes a whole lot of build-up. So, for example, I remember when the mobile money service was coming to Nigeria. It's very big in Kenya. That's the M-Pesa and all of that. So it wasn't so easy. Right now we're still even getting full grasp of it. About 77% of Nigerians didn't even know the mobile, payment system was something that was active in the country. And we have close to 97% who have never even tried to transact using the mobile, payment system, where everybody's used to the banking system way of making transactions. So the money transfer, the mobile money companies were not really making anything really, because they had the licenses, but there were no customers who trusted them because they were not really known, to say, oh, I want to engage in this way. And what the regulatory authority had to do, the CBN, they had to find a way to say, okay, let us leverage on the mobile network operators, the likes of MTN, Globalcom, who already have the agents, who have everything set up, they have the infrastructure. Let's just link with these people, because they have the mobile connect, and then partner them up with the mobile money operators. And based on this relationship can foster growth. Why? Because the customers are more more comfortable or trusting with these brands that are very popular. So based on the longevity of how long MTN, Globalcom, for example, in that jurisdiction have stayed in the country, it's easy for customers to really want to trust what new process will be coming through them. Even though the banking systems also try to put in the mobile payment, people will want to do it through their banks because they trust the bank. But I'm just saying, when regulatory authorities come up with new ways things should be done. They need to consider a whole lot of things, which is number one, communicating effectively as to the aims they want to achieve at the end of the day. Making sure they give room for adaptability, be it between the companies who are going to implement these changes or the customers who are going to accept the changes. And most importantly, having this communication system with the innovators who would have to help us, because we're going very digital these days, and we know how these things are leveraged on, even the, money launderers or people who are into crime, illegal activities are also leveraging on these digital systems, card payments, and all other kind of forms to aid their own activities. So that room needs to be there. Communication between the innovators will aid, in making things way better for us all, both for the regulatory authorities, for we companies who are in the business and are licensed to carry out money transmitting activities, and the entire customer base.
Absolutely. And Gabrielle, just to go on further than that, would you say, because it sounds like to me the MTOs such as yourselves, the telcos, you've all invested really well and really heavily into your tech, and it's working really well to go digital and things like that. Would you say all of the stakeholders in the remittance space have done the same thing, like the central bank has done the same thing? So while you're up in your game in your technology, they're also up in their game, or like the regulator, or have they stayed with their legacy systems, and has that made it difficult for the whole scenario?
Yes, it has made it quite difficult, to be honest, right? Because it seems like that we in the we fintech and money transmitting companies generally, we are a bit more quicker in accepting, the change of the tech thing compared to the, the regulatory authorities, who are a bit more comfortable with the way things have been and are slowly trying to transition into this new use of technology. So that gap, between the way we fintechs are running into the AI space and the regulatory authorities coming a bit behind, it's creating kind of difficulties. And sometimes communicating both ways could take months, for both parties to understand, okay, this is where we are and what we're trying to do, and then they get things done. So it's not the same. I wouldn't say they have all adopted the whole culture of being completely tech. I mean, if they have, I don't think we'll have so much issues. It's just to plug the API here, plug it there, and plug it there, and everybody runs through. So it's still in the process.
No, exactly, and I agree, and I think that's one thing to look forward to in the future. I think while things become more centralized, or why people become more open to APIs, it will just be easier to connect everyone, and again pass information through. So rather than you needing to report to the authority every month, your system will simply push that information through of any transactions that they need to see. I think we have that already at RemitONE with Austrac, which is the Australian governing body. So they've actually opened up. They're quite tech friendly. They've actually opened up their API, so you can report to them automatically. It will build the report and it will post it to their website under your account name. So super simple. It removes that human error section, a part of it. And again, it's kind of like they only have access to that part of the system that they need the information on, and again to see velocity checks and things like that, suspicious activity reporting, sanctions and blacklist hits. So hopefully the more we move along, but I think it's a positive thing to at least hear that they, particularly in your region, that they understand that the technology is the way to go. At the very, I think there are areas slower than others to pick up upon that, but I think Africa's done really well. Again, getting the unbanked banked again with those e-wallets and things like that is definitely moving faster than some of the other. No, but great stuff, and thank you very, very much for your answer. I'm going to move on to go back now to Richard. Richard, I want to delve into your other answer in a little bit more detail and go into the individual tools. Yeah? So what are the individual different tools within IDV? If you can unpack each one, please.
Yes, Oussama. Okay, thank you. Individual tools within IDV. Okay, so we talk specifically about IDV. There are two. but they get IDV first of all, IDV identity verification. So again, identity verification traditionally meant physically looking at a proof of ID and a proof of address document, and obviously lots of businesses will still do that. That's the face-to-face, but COVID has changed that landscape. So if you think about IDV as that process of checking proof of ID and proof of address, digitizing that has delivered two core pieces of technology. So, and they are digitally confirming that an identity document is genuine and confirming that someone lives at their address. Confirming someone lives at their address has traditionally been the quickest way to run this process, but it only works if the source of data confirming that someone lives at their address, and with that address you typically have evidence of their date of birth as well. That only works if the data is good. If the data isn't any good, there's not much point in trying to use data. So I talked about this before. Traditionally, and still in the majority of cases in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, data is the common way to run that process of confirming identity. It's not necessarily the safest way, but it's the quickest way. It gets the most people through the process without those individuals having to do anything other than supply information they would already supply as quickly as possible. All the new technology is around proving identity by using an identity document, but also looking at, as part of that process, the individual. So do I look like, and I talked about this before, do I look like the image on my identity document, and am I actually there? So you can see me waving my hand around. So
I get the feeling, Richard, that
Yeah.
Far East is way more advanced than us at actually using this and implementing this at the moment. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, the regulation is different. So yes, in one sense, yes. Is the technology is still in its infancy, though, I would say, as well. So yeah, the Far East is further ahead because they haven't got a culture of creating huge publicly available databases to share. So yeah, so the technology is driven by, the use of the technology is driven because is partly being driven by the fact that there isn't data available to run this process. So therefore, can I confirm I am who I am? And if you look at that in China, China people go about and pay. They do pay for. They go into shops and pay with their faces. So that's the key biometric. Your face is the key biometric. All of that technology exists. It's all available here. It just hasn't. There isn't widespread adoption of it. What we've found in our experience working with fintechs is fintechs are looking to try to globalize that process and deliver the same process irrespective of where someone is living and irrespective of the regulation that their business has to comply with. And that's where the difficulty comes. It's not in actually delivering the technology, it's just that the technology itself can't work or isn't allowed to be delivered in the same way in somewhere like Germany, in the way that it's delivered in the UK or the US, for example, or in other countries as well. So the complication in this process isn't the technology. The complication is, what does the regulation say I need to do, and what tools do I have available to run that process as well? So if you think about, again, the Far East, if there is no data, then I need to confirm that I look like the image on my passport, that I'm there. How am I going to do my proof of address? I can't. Unless I've got a source of data, I can't. So I can capture an image of a proof of address document, and then the technology gets interesting. So then, is that a genuine proof of address document? Again, these types of documents aren't templated. So when you capture these types of documents, you need to have your eyes wide open and accept that, what is the risk here in accepting this document? Because I've got no way of checking the information on that document unless, and this is where the other technology is going, is looking at technology similar to what we have with open banking or open finance, where you can ask an individual to share their login to their utility provider, and then the utility provider will confirm that it is that person, or rather that it's that person's logins. So where you have the ability to check someone's bank account using open banking, you can also do that with utility bills as well. So open finance will also open up opportunities there. But again, the way open finance is delivered means that currently, just because I share my bank account details with a business, doesn't mean that I am that person. That's just the assumption that if I've got the user ID and the password of that person's online banking account, I'm going to be that person. And so what you've seen in the US, interestingly, is a business called Plaid, a big open finance business, has bought a business called, I think they're called, I'm going to say Contigo. I don't think it's Contigo, but it begins with C. They've bought an identity business in the US. So that's the other thing that's happening there, that you're getting this merging of open finance with identity as well. So
it's a way of verifying someone, right? It's another layer or another way of verifying.
It's another layer. It's not quite there yet. So the benefit of open finance in theory is that, you know, I'll show you. If I share my login to my bank account, then you as an organization can see all of the information going through my bank account, so you can take a view on whether I'm a good risk to lend money to. And in a more mundane way, if I'm sharing that information to you, then in theory in the future regulators might go, well, that's enough for us to use as a source of data for an individual. But the regulation, the way the regulation tends to be written in a very and this is quite a sweeping generalization, is it's still, I want more than one source of information confirming that you are who you say you are. So so again, you know, so the technology is way ahead of where the regulation is at the moment, would be my summary. So it's easy for a business to hook into this technology, but it's harder for a business to open up in a, you think about certain corridors, that there'll be people on this call who want to open up business in certain corridors. Whilst it's technically possible, from a regulatory point of view, it might be very, very complicated. So if you think of Germany to Turkey, for example, that's an obvious corridor. Any individual in Germany will have to go through a process of having a video process to confirm their identity. If you're running that corridor from Germany, it will be easy, obviously, to run it from Turkey. But if you're running it from Germany, you've got to comply with the local regulation in Germany.
I was just going to touch upon, actually, funny you said that, Richard, the video, because I mean, I've subscribed to things before where not only will you have to leave your ID, but then you leave a short video, maybe saying a short phrase like so and so. How does that work?
That's machine learning technology. It's looking at, you know, so if I give you the phrase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then the technology is making sure that my lips are saying that phrase. So all of this technology works, but all of this technology isn't 100% accurate. So that's the other point to make about this as well. That when you run that process, for example, Oussama, the regulator in Germany doesn't say it specifically has to work in this way. It just says I need a video.
Right.
And so there are different versions of that capture. So that saying a phrase is one version of video, but the regulator and the businesses using that type of technology in Germany actually prefer where the video is capturing interaction between you and me, like we are now, for example.
Right.
But in terms of how it works, it's the I don't know the detail, but you know, we call that machine learning, and they'd also refer to artificial intelligence as well.
AI.
Essentially, the more data you push into this type of software, the better they get at making decisions on whether this is genuine or not.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much for that input, Richard. I'm going to push on, and we're going back to Imad. Imad, what tools have Evantagesoft developed or adopted to meet the regulators' requirements? So is there anything that you guys have developed in particular that you've into your system, or maybe something that you've added on to your system, a third-party provider that you've adopted to help meet the regulators' requirements?
Yeah, so we are currently working with various different partners in developing some digital tools, helping them to automate and digitalize compliance and AML related processes. So right now we are what we are doing is that we are developing some data-driven decision tools in terms of making real-time AML decisions. We are making some tools for real-time customer profiling, aggregation of data. Richard talked about touchless ID verification, like face verification, and also we are interestingly working on these solutions like face verification, voice biometrics. This is especially important for countries like, for example, Pakistan, where the infrastructure is not good. The more you go outside urban areas, infrastructure is more dependent on telecom services. So it's difficult to use any devices or these things to do various different verifications. So we are relying primarily on biometrics, but again, biometrics require some kind of dongle, some kind of gadget to be able to capture fingerprints. So we are working, we are in extensive R&D process to develop touchless verification tools in order to expedite and to make ID verification process more efficient. So this is where we are. We are working with RemitONE as well very closely on some of these initiatives. But in Pakistan, there's nothing branded as such being used by organizations. So more or less, these are customized developments based on their own requirements that are being done. But we are trying to aggregate these different features into a cloud-based solution, because in today's world, organizations tend not to spend a lot on capex. So we are aggregating this solution and making them more available through cloud as shared services, so that more and more organizations can be able to use it at lesser cost. It's faster to onboard, faster to use, easier to use, and economical for them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Gabrielle, same question to you. Are there any particular tools that you use to help you with your compliance, or anything that you've developed in-house?
Mostly in-house. We've used just mostly third parties, whom we've just relied on some of the softwares for KYC verification. I mean, the ID identity authentication, for the PEP screening, sanction screenings, and all of that. We're still developing some in-house, which is still in process, and that's really for the ID verification, also utility bill authentication as well. But that's still ongoing. But right now, we kind of rely solely on companies who have very robust, AML software set up, as Richard had kind of also described, and that's really the services we are running with presently to just control everything we check for due diligence.
Okay, excellent, fantastic. Using aggregate for sanctions and black, or are you getting them directly from the source? I think I cut out there.
Sorry, I didn't
Did you get that question? Sorry, I think I cut out there. In terms of your compliance and sanctions lists, are you using aggregators for that, or are you getting it directly from the source?
Oh, for the OFAC is directly from the source, but for the other tests, for the UN sanctions and the EU, everything that's based on aggregators. For the PEP screenings too, we still use aggregators to collect all of that information. In-house, for the monitoring is in-house. Transaction monitoring, seeing the trends, structuring of payments, just to create a client profile, all that is in-house set up by the IT team. Threshold monitoring and reporting requirements, all that is in-house built rather. But for just the screenings, yes, we kind of rely on the aggregators, and for the OFAC, that's just the only one we directly plug into.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely makes sense. I'm going to actually ask the next question. It's going to be an open question. So for anyone who would like to jump in on this, what can we expect to see in RegTech solutions in the next 12 to 24 months? So regulatory technology in terms of, and that could be any part from ID to again velocity checks to absolutely anything. What can we expect to see over the next 12 to 24 months? Should we start off with Richard?
Sure. So I think where the direction of travel is that we're looking at how do we combine fraud screening with ID verification and PEPs and sanction screening. So it's all of that. How do we make that? And when I say we, I don't just mean me. I don't mean GB, but I mean GBG, our peers. We're all looking at that end-to-end journey. How do we make it as safe as possible and as frictionless as possible? It's a big job, and it won't happen overnight. But that's certainly the way. The way it's moving is trying to build more fraud screening tools into that process, because that's the long-term view of digital identities. Digital identity isn't something just to be created at will. If you create your digital identity and you entrust an organization with that, you want to make sure it's not going to be compromised. So that's where certainly where our business is heading, and a lot of businesses like us as well.
Yeah, excellent. So it's good to get a perspective from an actual, again, someone who's in that supply chain themselves as a provider of that compliance tool, and as somebody, a user of that compliance tool, Imad, what do you see happening, or what do you look forward to happening in the next 12, 24 months? Is there anything that you look forward to coming up in tech that you may apply to your business, or that hasn't come to fruition yet, or something that could come about in the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, like Richard mentioned, we think that ID verification is going to be critical. It has been a critical element because it's the most loaded and cumbersome process. This is the process that takes a lot of cost. This is the process that takes a lot of time. And this is the process where primary risk lies. Definitely automated fraud protection, risk protection, these tools are there. But our regulator has been extremely focused on improving as much as possible this ID verification process, because if that is established with accuracy, with authority, and if it can be scaled up to wider customer base, that is what will ease out a lot of things in terms of money transfers and remittances. And this is why we are very focused. Like, interestingly, there are a lot of initiatives that various different institutions, government institutions and organizations in Pakistan are working on, like, for example, Nairagram, which is the custodian of citizen database. They have been quite innovative and quite keen in terms of improvising and innovating further, using the gold mine that they are sitting at in terms of ID verification services. So that is what is critical for us and for the regulator here in Pakistan.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, man. We've got sort of 10 minutes or so of this session. I'm just going to, before I go into the final part of it, we're going to take some questions from the audience for the next 5 or 7 minutes, and then we should wrap up. I've got one question here, Stella. Stella's asking a question to I suppose it's for Richard. In relation to the comment on fraud screening with ID verification process, is GBG currently offering any solution in this regard?
Sorry, I'm muting. At the moment, we offer the ability to check 3 things very quickly. So is the ID genuine? Are you there behind the screen? So is it you who's presenting your identity? So looking at both your face and looking at whether you're actually physically there. So a liveness check. And then the other thing we do is we check mobile phone numbers as well. So is that your mobile phone number? Is it tied to you as well? As a business, we offer fraud screening. We have a whole platform we can deliver fraud screening solutions on. Where we want to get to is to offer software as a service in that. But again, fraud screening it depends on which part of that. When you look at fraud screening, it's quite broad. So where we're trying to do is looking at fraud in terms of is this person who wants to send some money? Are you that person? That's the question we're trying to answer. And can we flag, looking at your mobile phone number, your identity documents, and you physically, whether we think you actually are that person?
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that answer, Richard. We got another one from Jamila. How can AML or CFT affect cryptocurrency and BDC transactions? I guess that would suppose on what regulations are on those particular. I know crypto can be classed as separate from remittances, isn't it? I mean, it really depends. I don't know, it hasn't been around that for that long. So, I mean, let's take let's go to Gabrielle. And Gabrielle, do you know what the Nigerian government regulation is on crypto? Do they have any AML policies and procedures? Are they similar to the remittance ones? Is that something that you handle?
For now, I think that's still in the works. There's nothing completely out there. As I said, it's still new. And as of last year, I think Nigeria was not really so open-minded to the crypto until recently. They're beginning to really work, take baby steps, but at least there are steps into exploring that domain. So right now, there's nothing so concrete, given out to crypto in the jurisdiction. But we all know, I think these are like what would I call the myths we hear about the crypto space, where, someone sends my coins over and you don't know where it's coming from or where it's ending up at. There's all these different stories of things we hear about the crypto space. And also, of course, money launderers use that. People who want to finance crime, so terrorism also use those mediums to make, to move value, cross-border in different forms. So they utilize the systems, but there are still structures and definitely more regulatory processes or policies to be put out on them as we all get to learn, about the crypto space a bit more and how to control them. So it's still something in the works, but definitely soon enough, we should have something a bit more concrete to address that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't the whole thing about crypto and blockchain anonymity? So part of that, it causes all sorts of AML and compliance issues, right? If someone's sending again one crypto from one to another, you don't know who that's coming from. A lot of people use those sort of methods to receive money from nefarious operations because they know they can't be looked at. So it does cause all sorts of AML issues, and there aren't many. You're right, there aren't many sort of regulations on it at the moment because it's so young, as we pointed out, and that's probably again so tricky answer. The tricky question to answer, should I say? There isn't many sort of I wouldn't say rules and regulations. Some countries are banning it outright, banning the use of it outright, like some Middle Eastern countries. I know China's tightened up on it, so yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think we actually have I think the last one's more of a statement. Remittance compliance AML, a business enabler or a deal breaker. I think we asked that one to Gabrielle earlier on, didn't we already? A similar question. Does it hinder business or does it help you grow? We've already asked that. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So guys, I'm going to wrap up there then. So thank you very much to everyone for attending this panel session, and a big thanks to our panelists. We hope you all found the session useful. We'd also like to send a special thanks to our event sponsors, Vine, Nairagram, Trust Payments, Azza Finance, WorldPay, GBG, and Currency Cloud. Do make sure that you visit their virtual booths between the panel sessions, which you can navigate to via the menu at the top of your screen. If you want to review what has been discussed today, we'll be providing a written summary and video upload of all today's sessions at remitone.com and in our next RemitONE newsletter, so keep an eye out for that. Lastly, thanks again everyone, and please get in touch if there's anything you'd like to discuss regarding the session or how RemitONE or any of our partners can help your money transfer business. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Richard, for joining. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Gabrielle. Thanks, Imad.
everyone.
Speak to you
Thank
guys.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Pleasure
Take care.
having you as always.
Thank you.